there's lights, you know.
I think we've understood from the Sheikh's indication that we're going to carry on inshallah ta'ala. We're going to start the lesson right away. The Sheikh inshallah ta'ala is going to continue on explaining the book of purification from Manhaj, as-Saalikeen. Inshallah ta'ala, we shall go on to the book of prayer and carry out the chapters pertaining to the description of the salah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين. طيب أما بعد, we'll continue with our kitab Manhaj as-Saalikeen that we started yesterday. And Manhaj as-Saalikeen, this book is on al-fiqh al-Islami. It is on the fiqh, the Islamic jurisprudence, Islamic law. And Islam is a complete way of life. Islam, right from the beginning of our creation, right up until the end, deals with everything in our life. طيب, so we were on nawaqid al-wudu. We were on babu nawaqid al-wudu, things that nullify one's wudu. A Muslim, or one of the conditions of salah, is at-tahara. One of the conditions of as-salah is purification. And if a person is not pure in terms of wudu and removing the impurities from them, then their salah is not accepted. So every single Muslim, it has to pray 5 times a day. The difference between the Muslims and the non-Muslims is the salah, as the Messenger ﷺ said. So this salah that is wajib, we need to be able to perform wudu. Alhamdulillah, we studied wudu. What are the pillars of wudu, or the requirements of wudu? Furud al-wudu. Who remembers from yesterday? Things that we need to do during wudu. Wash your face, na'am. What else? Including the mouth and the nose. What else? The arms up until the elbows. What else? Wipe over the head. Excellent. And feet. 4. What about the other 2? There were 2 more. We do it in order and in close sequence. In close sequence. Mawalat. So when you make wudu, when you're at home, you can't obviously wash your hands and your face and your elbows and then go to the masjid and say, I'm going to wash my feet in the masjid. It has to be in close sequence. Today, we're going to go through nawaqid al-wudu, things that nullify this wudu. So after you've made wudu, there are things that you've got to watch out for that nullify your wudu. Now, some of these things that the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala is going to mention, there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. And if you ever hear there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars, there's khilaf amongst the scholars, it's not based on desires. You can't say, I'm Shafi'i, so I'm going to do this, and I'm Hanbali, so I'm going to do that. La. The khilaf that we find amongst the scholars is always based on evidence. As we shall see, some of the things that we shall come across, they may use one hadith. For example, as we shall see, ghusl yawm al-jum'ah. Some scholars say it's wajib, and some scholars say it's sunnah. Both sets of scholars use as evidence the hadith of Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu and Uthman, where Umar was given a khutbah and he says, and Uthman came in late. So he said, he condemned Uthman for coming late, and then Uthman said, sorry, I couldn't make ghusl and I came here. And then Umar said, and you didn't even make ghusl. You came late and you did not make ghusl. That one hadith, the scholars say we take from it that ghusl is wajib. And another set of scholars say that we take from it that ghusl is not wajib. How? They say the fact that Umar condemned him and said to Uthman, why are you not making wudu? And he stopped the khutbah. That shows that it is wajib. On the other hand, they say, la, Uthman, from Khulafa al-Rashidin, from the Khulafa of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the leaders of the Muslim, the leader of the believers, the fact that he did not make ghusl to come to the masjid shows it is not wajib. So ala kulli hal, these things that we're going to mention, there is some sort of difference in them, lakin we'll see inshallah. Al-awwal, the first one, وهي الخارج من السبيلين, everything that comes out of the private parts. Everything that comes out of the private parts, male or female, nullifies wudu. Nullifies wudu. And the things that come out of the private parts, number 1 and 2, as you're aware. Number 3, there's many, sperm, semen. That nullifies the wudu. Yes, it requires ghusl later on, as we shall see, like it nullifies the wudu. Then there's al-wadi, which comes out. It's a thin substance that comes out due to sexual arousement. That also nullifies the wudu. And if a person does have that, then they need to wash it off and make wudu again. Then there's wadi, which is some sort of kind of like an illness, not a major disease, like in some sort of illness that there's a problem, and that usually comes out after urine, and that requires for the Muslim to wash it off and then make wudu. طيب. And then there's obviously the blood that comes out of the women on a monthly basis. That nullifies the wudu as well. And then there's the blood that comes out of when a woman gives birth. That also nullifies the wudu. So all of these things that come out of the private parts and pass in wind as well, they nullify the wudu. If a person does any of that, then he needs to or she needs to make wudu immediately. So that's the first thing that nullifies wudu, which is what? What is it? What nullifies wudu? Anything that comes out of the private parts. Saying al-kharij min as-sabilayn makes it a lot easier for you. Saying anything that comes out of the private parts. Instead of saying this breaks your wudu, this breaks your wudu, this breaks your wudu, just say anything that comes out of the private part nullifies wudu. طيب, the Shaykh says وَالدَّمُ الْكَثِيرُ وَنَحْوُهُ. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah, and a lot of blood coming out of the body. Obviously not the private parts, like in other parts of the body, whether it's the chest, whether it's the arm. For example, if you've had surgery and there's a lot of blood coming out of your arm, or if you've got a wound and there's a lot of blood coming out of your leg or whatever it may be. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah, that nullifies wudu. وَنَحْوُهُ, and anything like it. So for example, hijama, if a person does hijama, blood clotting, cupping, if a person does cupping, then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, that nullifies the wudu. Why? Because there's a lot of blood that is going to come out of it. Al-kathir, which means if you've got a little bit of blood, you accidentally staple your hand or there's a pin and a little bit of blood comes out, the Shaykh says obviously that doesn't nullify the wudu. وَنَحْوُهُ, and anything like it. For example, if a person vomits, the Shaykh means, and the fuqaha, that's what they mean. Or if a person vomits, or there's blood coming out, they say that it nullifies the wudu. Lakin, wallahu a'lam, the stronger opinion is that it doesn't nullify the wudu. Because the companions, ridwanullahi alayhim, they used to pray in their wounds. They used to pray whilst there was blood dripping from them. And the Messenger ﷺ did not command them to repeat the salah or repeat the wudu. And there's a companion who was guarding the Muslims on one of the journeys of the Messenger ﷺ. And the mushrikun, they threw arrows at him. They fired arrows at him. And he was bleeding in his salah. And he did not wake the other companion up that was with him, who was Ammar ibn Yasir, I believe. He did not wake him up until he was dripping in blood. And the Messenger ﷺ did not command him to repeat the wudu. The Messenger ﷺ did not command him to repeat the wudu. طيب. So how many things nullify the wudu so far? What? Anything that leaves the private parts? Huh? Blood that leaves the body? Large amount. That doesn't nullify. I just said it doesn't nullify the wudu. It doesn't nullify the wudu. Only that which comes out of the private parts. So where it says, with damul kathir, I know the Shaykh mentioned that, rahimahullah ta'ala, that's an opinion amongst the madhabs. And the Shaykh himself takes the other opinion as well in one of his ikhtiyarat of al-fiqhiyah. So, the Hanbali opinion, yeah. No. And the Jamhur, that it nullifies a lot of blood coming out, nullifies the body. Lakin, Allahu A'lam, the stronger opinion is that it doesn't nullify. So even if you've got a cut on your hand and a lot of blood does come out, or if you vomit, then it doesn't nullify your wudu. It's enough that you rinse your mouth out with water and that you cover the wound. That's enough. Lakin it doesn't nullify your wudu. So how many things nullify the wudu so far? One, which is al-kharij min as-sabilayn. That comes out with that which comes out the private parts. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَزَوَالُ الْعَقْلِ بِنَوْمٍ أَوْ غَيْرِهِ, or losing consciousness, losing your mind, بِنَوْمٍ أَوْ غَيْرِهِ, with nawm, by sleeping, or other than that. So if you lose your consciousness, if you lose your mind, then you have broken your wudu. Example, a person goes into intensive care. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure us and all of the believers. If a person goes into intensive care or if a person goes into coma, mathalan, or if a person goes insane, or if a person becomes drunk, or if a person is intoxicated with any other drug, or if a person sleeps, all of these things nullify the wudu. Why? Because you may have broken your wudu during that time and you don't know what you're doing. Like with sleep, it's of two types. Sleep is of two types. There's deep sleep and there's light sleep. So for example, when you're on a bus, when you're on a train and on your way home and you're tired, you kind of end up dozing off. And you might be tired. Or even when you're sitting down, you might doze off. Like you're aware of what's going on around you. So to the extent that if your phone rings, you're able to answer it. Or even if it vibrates in your pocket, you can feel it, so you get it out. That sort of sleep doesn't nullify your wudu because it's light sleep. And Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu said that the companions كان تخفق رؤوسهم. When the companions were waiting for Isha, they used to obviously fall asleep for about a split second, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, a minute or so. Then they would wake up again. So light sleep doesn't nullify your wudu. Like in proper sleep where you lose your senses, then with that sleep, it nullifies your wudu. طيب. So that's the what? The second thing that nullifies the wudu. What's the first? Anything that leaves your private parts. What's the second? Loss of consciousness. However it may be. As long as if you lose your mind or consciousness and you lose your senses, then your wudu is invalid and you need to repeat and make up your wudu. طيب وأكل لحم الجزور, and eating camel's meat. Nullifies your wudu. Due to the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he said to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, نتوضأ من لحوم الإبل, do we make wudu from the camel's meat? The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said na'am. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said na'am. Also the companion said كنا نتوضأ من لحوم الإبل ولا نتوضأ من لحوم الغنم. We used to make wudu from the meat of the camel and we never used to make wudu from the meat of the sheep. طيب. So that is a nullifier from wudu. Why? Allahu A'lam. Why do we have to make wudu? Allahu A'lam, from camel's meat. Some scholars mention some reasonings, like Allahu A'lam, at the end of the day, ta'abbudi is something that Allah Jalla wa'ala commanded us with. طيب. Also, what about, so the lahm, we understand the meat, but what about the kidneys and the liver and so on? What would you say? Should we make wudu from it or not? The kidneys. Kidneys are not meats, huh? The liver and so on. They're not exactly considered red meat, are they? Lahm, yeah. They're considered organs, so it's not part of meat. Otherwise it would have been mentioned. طيب. Camel's meat is halal as well. Making wudu from it. That difference of opinion. Lakin, the best or the safer option, khurujan min al-khilaf, leaving the khilaf, is to make wudu from it. Although there's a difference of opinion. Lakin, if you find a difference of opinion, sometimes there's something which is called khurujan min al-khilaf. You're doing something while it's leaving the khilaf. So, just by making wudu, you've now left off just by making wudu, if you eat any of these organs, if you make wudu, then both sets of scholars say your wudu is now correct. But that's not the case for those that say only you have to make wudu from it. If you don't make wudu, then they say you've eaten an organ, therefore your wudu is invalid. طيب. What about milk? Camel's milk. It's not meat. No, it is not meat. So how many things do we have so far that nullify wudu? 3. Yahya?
Anything that leaves the private parts.
Okay.
The loss of consciousness.
and eating camel's meat. طيب. The Sheikh says, and by the way, that yeah. وَمَسُّ الْمَرْأَةِ بِشَهْوَةٍ, and touching a woman with sexual desire. Touching a woman with sexual desire. طيب. That doesn't nullify the wudu. That doesn't nullify the wudu. Obviously the meaning is, number one, that you touch bare hand without a covering, and it's with shahwa. It is with shahwa. So that's the opinion that the Shaykh is mentioning. Which obviously means that if a person touches his sister, children, mother and so on, then that doesn't nullify the wudu, because that is not with desires. Like in the stronger opinion is, wallahu alam, that it doesn't nullify the wudu. The stronger opinion is that it doesn't nullify the wudu, because where Allah Jalla wa Ala says, أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءَ, the meaning is actual jima', is actual intercourse. So based on that, there is no clear evidence that says that it nullifies the wudu. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would be on his way to the masjid, he would leave the house, he would leave his home, and he would kiss his wives on his way. And there is some sort of desire related and connected to that. So that doesn't nullify the wudu. That does not nullify the wudu. وَمَسُّ الْفَرْجِ, and touching the private parts. A person touching his private parts, again, not with a covering, like in the bare hand, whether it's the front or the back, male or female. So the Shaykh says it nullifies the wudu. And that is based on different hadith. First, the Messenger said, "Man massa dhakarahu fala yusalli hatta yatawadda." Whoever touches his private parts, let him not make wudu, let him not pray until he makes wudu. The Messenger said, "Man massa dhakarahu falyatawadda." Whoever touches his private parts, then let him make wudu. طيب. Lakin there's other hadith, or there's another hadith in which the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked about the private part, a person touching his private part in the salah. And the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَهَلْ هُوَ إِلَّا مُضْغَةٌ مِنْكَ أَوْ بَضْعَةٌ. Is it not a part of your body? Is it not only a part of your body? So the scholars say, by combining these two hadith, the obligation in the first hadith comes down to istihbab, mustahab. Comes down to mustahab. Because if you have two ahadith, it's better to apply both of them and do jam', to combine both ahadith, than leaving off one hadith and implementing one hadith. It's always better to combine al-jam' awla min al-tarjih, they say. That combining a hadith is better than saying that this is rajih and that is not rajih. So you implement this in a situation and implement this other hadith in a situation. So there are many scholars on that, from the Ibn Taymiyyah and from the Ma'asir and those contemporary scholars, Shaykh ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah, that it is upon istihbab. Some scholars say if a person touches it with sexual desire, then it nullifies the wudu. Other than that, it doesn't nullify the wudu. Lakin, by implementing these two hadith, then it may be said that it is a sunnah to make wudu if a person touches his private parts. And more so if it's with sexual desire. Lakin, if a person makes wudu, it's tayyib. If a person does make wudu, leaving all of the khilaf, alhamdulillah, then that is called khuruj min al-khilaf. Lakin, there's khilaf in this mas'ala. So how many things do we have so far that nullify the wudu? 3. Everything that comes out of the private parts. Number 2, zawal al-aqli, losing consciousness, and also eating camel's meat. The Shaykh says, وَغِدَّةُ وَهِيَ تُحْبِضُ الْأَعْمَالَ كُلَّهَا. لا, there's something before it. وتغسيل الميت يعني, so if a person washes the deceased, the Shaykh says that it nullifies the wudu. It nullifies the wudu. Lakin, Allahu A'lam, from some of the companions, it has been authentically narrated that they never used to wash from the companions, and it was recommended to do so because you might be touching some sort of najasat. Lakin, there is no clear-cut evidence to prove that it nullifies the wudu. And that is implementing the hadith or the qa'ida, al-yaqeen la yazulu bi-shak. If you're certain of something, then we need certainty equal to it for us to leave off that first certainty. So the certainty that we have cannot be removed by doubt or possibilities. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, وَغِدَّةُ وَهِيَ تُحْبِطُ جَمِيعَ الْأَعْمَالِ أو الأعمال كلها. La. That's the whole point we're talking about now. It doesn't nullify your wudu. As for whether it's sunnah or not, we shall see. It's sunnah. It's not wajib, meaning that if you don't do it, your salah is invalid. If you do pray. It's not the case. So it's sunnah. طيب. وردة, the Shaykh says ridda, apostating. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us firm upon Islam. A ridda, so a person apostating. Apostating is leaving the religion of Islam, either by a belief, or having doubt, or an action, or a statement. Leaving Islam by one of these four ways. طيب. So the Shaykh says, وَردة. In reality, mentioning that is a naqid from nawaqid al-wudu, there isn't really a big fa'idah in it. There isn't really a thamara or any action that comes about because of it. Why? Because if a person disbelieves and they are kafir, they are no longer a Muslim, if they want to come back into Islam, they need to make wudu. If they want to come back into Islam, they need to make ghusl anyway. So that wudu they made has no benefit for them. And if they don't come back to Islam, then they're kuffar. Wudu has no difference for them. So there isn't really a point in mention. There is a point in mention because the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala mentions it. Lakin, in terms of the thamara, the fa'idah, or the difference, there is not much difference, because whether we say it nullifies the wudu or not, if a person leaves Islam and they want to come back in, they need to make ghusl. Sah? Understood. And if they don't come back into Islam, then they are kuffar. And the wudu of a kafir has no benefit. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, لِقَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى أَوْ جَاءَ أَحَدٌ مِّنكُم مِّنَ الْغَائِدِ أَوْ لَامَسْتُمُ النِّسَاءِ. He uses this verse to prove that anything that comes out the private parts nullifies the wudu, and also for the touching of the women. Like we mentioned, that the stronger opinion is that it doesn't nullify the wudu. But it doesn't mean that we can obviously touch women that are not our family relatives, that are the maharim, mothers and sisters and daughters and so on, or wives. Like it just doesn't nullify the wudu. So some people, when they're going to the shop, for example, and they're getting their change, if the woman's putting the money in their hand, they run away, which is good, you should run away. Like if her hand accidentally does touch your hand when she's giving you the change, it doesn't nullify your wudu. وَسُئِلَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم, the Prophet was asked, أَنَ نَتَوَضَّأُ مِنْ لُحُومِ الْإِبِلِ, should we make wudu from the meat of the camel? He said, نعم صلى الله عليه وسلم. نعم. وفي الخفين ولكن من غائد وبول ونوم. And also the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said, do not wipe over your socks from going to the bathroom, coming up wherever comes out the private parts, and also noam, or also sleep. That's the end of that chapter. Nullifies of the wudu. What nullifies the wudu of a Muslim? Excellent. Going to the toilet, what else? Loss of consciousness and sleeping. Excellent. Sleeping nullifies the wudu. Fantastic. Eating camel's meat nullifies the wudu. How many things? 3 things. Everything that comes out of private parts, loss of consciousness, and eating camel's meat. And apostasy. And apostasy nullifies the wudu. باب ما يوجب الغسل وصفته. This chapter is now talking about ghusl. So in types of purification, we mentioned there was what? Hadath al-akbar and asghar. Minor impurity and major impurity. What has preceded everything that we pass now is to do with the minor impurity, which is if a person goes to the bathroom, loss of consciousness and so on. The other type that we're going to talk about now is if a person falls into something which requires the major impurity, which requires ghusl, that they wash the whole body. Wudu is only washing the face, the mouth, obviously, and the nose, the hands, the feet, and wiping over the head, right? That's wudu, khalas. Lakin ghusl is a bath, and bath means you wash the whole body. So in this chapter, we're going to learn why we need to make ghusl, what requires us to make ghusl, and also we're going to learn how to make ghusl. So the Shaykh says رحمه الله تعالى ويجب الغسل من الجنابة وهي إنزال المني بوضع أو غيره أو بالتقاء الختانين وخروج الدم. طيب. The first thing that the Shaykh says, if a person falls into sexual impurity, they need to make ghusl. When studying these ahkam and these rulings, people might be shy. And it's good because obviously shyness is from the religion. Like when it comes to ilm and learning, there is no shyness when it comes to learning. And the Salaf used to say 2 people will never learn knowledge. A person who is shy in seeking knowledge, where he doesn't want people to see him or he doesn't give an answer because he's shy, and the mutakabbir, the person who has kibr, who's proud and how can I sit down with these miscellaneous and so on. Person who is haughty, they will never learn. So the Shaykh says if a person falls into sexual impurity, then they require a ghusl. As for how to make ghusl, we're going to get to that at the end of the chapter. Like in write a title, why we need to make ghusl, or what requires ghusl. Or you can write under the title of the Shaykh, what requires ghusl. The first one, number 1, is sexual impurity. And that happens in several ways. Number 1, the Shaykh says, inzalul mani biwat'in. The ejaculation of semen when a person has intercourse. That requires a person to make wudu. And when this is being talked about, when the scholars are talking about, it means that if a person, obviously the sperm comes out or the semen comes out due to sexual desire, due to intercourse. Like if a person is like مثلا awake and they've got this illness where it pours out, comes out, then that doesn't require ghusl, that requires wudu, because that's a type of illness. طيب. So the first one is inzalul maniyyi, ejaculation of sperm, biwat'in, with intercourse. أو غيره, or other than that, or anything that is similar to it. For example, if a person looks at something that is that can cause their sexual arousal to come about, then they may ejaculate sperm. If that is the case, then they need to make ghusl and not wudu. Also, masturbation, wal-iyadu billah. If a person does that and it's haram, obviously it's haram. Lakin, wal-iyadu billah, if a person does fall into that, although it's haram, and they repent, lakin they still need to make ghusl. So if a person does do that, they need to make ghusl. Number 1, it's haram, but number 2, they need to make ghusl from it because it is a sexual impurity. أو بالتقاء الختانين, or by having intercourse. طيب. What about wet dreams? If a person has a wet dream, and they wake up and they remember the dream and they can see the wetness, they need to make ghusl. Write these 4 situations down. Number 1, and this is extremely important, especially given the fact that you're youngsters and you're shabab, and many of you are single. It's important that you know these ahkam, because if you're on this impurity, you can't pray, you can't read the Quran, as we shall see, you can't do a lot of things. Therefore, it's important that we know. So if a person remembers that they had a wet dream, they remember what was going on in the dream, and they wake up and there's wetness on the bed, they need to make ghusl. They need to have a bath. The second situation is if a person doesn't remember the dream, but they see the wetness, and they know it's semen, it's sperm. So they don't remember the actual dream, they know that they've now had a wet dream because they're wet. They wake up, and there's this thick white substance that has a certain smell on their bed. In that case, what you need to do is make ghusl. طيب. Like in the opposite, if a person remembers the dream that they had, the third one, if a person remembers the dream that they had, like they can't see any wetness on the bed, they can't feel anything, do they need to make ghusl? La, they don't need to make ghusl. Why? Because nothing has come out. Nothing has come out. طيب. What about if a person cannot remember the dream? He cannot remember anything. Like he finds wetness on his bed. He can't remember anything, any dream. Like he finds moist and wetness on the bed. And he can't differentiate whether it's sperm or not. It's not sperm, but he's just concerned why it's wet. Does he need to make wudu? Ghusl. Huh? لا, he doesn't need to make ghusl. So that's the fourth situation. Why? Because al-yaqeen la yazul bishak. You know that you are not in sexual impurity by yaqeen. It's not lifted except with certainty. So you do not mean to make wudu. Who's going to repeat those four situations? Who's going to repeat those four? Who's written it down? Excellent.
So the first one is if the person can remember
The dream.
and they see wetness, they make ghusl.
They see the wetness and they know it's sperm. طيب.
And the second one is if they can't remember the dream but they see wetness.
And it is sperm. Yeah.
Right? So they make ghusl.
Mm.
Third one is if they can remember a dream but they don't see any wetness, then they don't make ghusl.
Excellent.
And the fourth one is if they see wetness but they can't remember any dream,
Mm.
they don't have to make ghusl. Obviously, it's not sperm.
Excellent. They don't have to make ghusl. طيب. So that's the first thing that requires ghusl. Then the Shaykh says نعم من جنابة ومن خروج دم الحيض والنفاس, and the ending of hayd and nifas. These two types of blood, the blood that comes out of women. The first one is hayd, that comes out once a month or so. And during that time they can't pray and they can't fast and so on. And then there's nifas, which is postnatal bleeding. When they give birth, they bleed for about 40 days or 30, 50 days, something like that. And with that case, they can't obviously pray as well. So when it ends, they need to make ghusl. When it ends, they need to make ghusl. Obviously not at the beginning. They can make it, if they want, they can have ghusl, they can have a bath. Like not the bath that purifies them and makes them ready for salah. Like when it ends. So where it says وَخُرُوجِ دَمِ الْحَيْض, you might want to write وَانْقِطَاعُ دَمِ الْحَيْض, when it ends. طيب, and the Shaykh says وَمَوْتِ غَيْرِ الشَّهِيد, and death. And when a person passes, the deceased person, other than the shaheed. So when a person dies, every single Muslim must be washed and cleaned with perfume and so on, using soap and so on. Every Muslim must be washed, except for the shaheed. Who is the shaheed? The shaheed, as the Messenger of Allah said, is the person that goes out and dies on the battlefield in jihad, fi sabilillah. And that jihad is what? Man qatala litakuna kalimatullahi al-ulya. The one that fights for the sake of Allah, not tribalism, not the person who's fighting for a country, not a person who's fighting for a football team or a gang or whatever. The person who fights for the sake of Allah Jalla wa'ala. Like those companions who died in Badr, like those companions who died on Uhud, on the day of Uhud, and other instances where the Muslims were fighting the non-Muslims. So the shaheed is the one that dies in a battle, in the battlefield, on the day where the Muslims are fighting the non-Muslims, and it's for the word of Allah Jalla wa'ala to be most high. So they're not washed, nor are they to be prayed upon. They don't need to be washed and they don't need to be prayed upon, and they would be raised in their blood and so on, Yawm al-Qiyamah. Lakin, nowadays we hear a lot of people saying, he's a shaheed, shaheed fulan, he's a shaheed. Lakin, in reality, that person is not shaheed, he's not a martyr. Shaheed means martyr. So sometimes you will find people going out demonstrations, and what they call this Arab Spring in the Middle East, and they say whoever dies in Maidan al-Tahrim or in these places of where the Muslims are doing their demonstrating, whoever dies in that is a shaheed, is a martyr. Like, and that's batil. That person is not a martyr. If anything, he's fallen into a bid'ah, he's fallen into a sin by rebelling against the leader of his country. So he's not a martyr. So may Allah forgive them. Like, they are washed as normal. Like, what I want to bring to your attention is that they are not martyrs. Today you will find a person that commits crime against a Muslim country and they decide to kill him, or they decide to imprison him, and they call him a shaheed. Why is he a shaheed? Why is he a martyr? He's the one that's fallen into crime. He's a mujrim, he's a criminal for causing disunity amongst the Muslims. طيب. وإسلام الكافر, also a person, when a person accepts Islam, they need to make ghusl. They need to make ghusl. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded one of the companions that accepted Islam to make wudu. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded him to make wudu. Also the companion that was called Thumama, when he accepted Islam, he went away, made ghusl, and then he came back.
You know, if somebody has a shak that they might have left Islam, does that rule apply to me as well? Certainty doesn't.
Naam, it applies that. Naam. What you're certain of, you can't leave your certainty for any doubt. So if a person is sure that they're Muslim and they said La ilaha illallah, but they have a doubt, that shak is from shaitan, it's from whispers from shaitan, whispers of shaitan. So they shouldn't pay attention to that. That's why this qa'idah, that principle of yaqeen la yazul bi-shak, is from the major principles of fiqh. It can be applied across the board. It can be applied in many different issues and masail. طيب. وإسلام الكافر, and the person becoming a Muslim. قال تعالى وإن كنتم جنبا فطهروا. إن كنتم جنبا فطهروا. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, if you are in a state of janaba, then perform فطهروا, then perform ghusl, wash yourselves. طيب. So how many things require ghusl? How many things require ghusl? 4. What are they? Janaba, in sexual impurity. Excellent. When a disbeliever accepts Islam, the ending of menstruation and the ending of. Excellent. That requires. Like it, as for the shaheed, the martyr that dies on the battlefield, fighting for the sake of Allah, then they are not to be punished. They are not to be washed. طيب. And the Shaykh says, وَقَدْ أَمَرَ النَّبِيُّ صلى الله عليه وسلم بِالْغُسْلِ مِنْ تَغْسِيلِ الْمَيِّتِ. Lakin, there's the matan, one of the mashayikh, one of the scholars who explained this hadith, this kitab, they mentioned that is a mistake in the book, and what is actually meant, or what was written in the book of the Shaykh, the author, he says, وَقَدْ أَمَرَ النَّبِيُّ بِالتَّغْسِيلِ الْمَيِّتِ. That's what it means. So it means that if a person passes away, then they are to be. If a person passes away, then they are to be washed. We already passed that. We already said that if a Muslim dies, they are to be washed. طيب. There are other ghusls. So these types of ghusls are wajib. A person must do them in order for his salah to be accepted, in order for his salah to be sound. Then there are other types of ghusls which are mustahab, which are sunnah. There are other type of ghusls that are mustahab. Number 1, ghusl yawm al-jum'ah. Ghusl yawm al-jum'ah. Performing ghusl yawm al-jum'ah. Go on. That's exactly it. That's what ghusl is. There are two ways of doing it, and we'll see that in a minute, inshallah. Yeah? طيب. So the first one is ghusl yawm al-jum'ah. So it's a sunnah to perform ghusl yawm al-jum'ah when you're coming to the masjid. When you're coming to the masjid, because Friday is a special day. So the person that performs Jum'ah is the one that is coming to the masjid, male or female. As long as you're coming to the masjid, number 1, you perform ghusl. Also, you can perform ghusl in the morning, and even if you go to work and then you go somewhere else, or you break your wudu, that's fine. As long as you make ghusl in the morning when you're leaving your home. When you get to the masjid, even if you break your wudu, it's fine. You just make your wudu and your ghusl is correct. You'll be rewarded for the ghusl that you performed. طيب. غسل من غسل الميت. If a person washes a dead body, then it's a sunnah to wash them. It is a sunnah to wash them or to make wudu. Also, if a person falls unconscious, loss of consciousness due to being going into coma, then it's sunnah for them to, or a person being intoxicant, taking something which is an intoxicant, then it's sunnah for them to make ghusl. طيب. That is for cleansiness. For Yawm al-Jum'ah, it's a special day, so when a person comes to the masjid, they should perform ghusl. If the person has got dirt on him and they're sweating and so on, it's more of a sunnah, it's strongly recommended that they make ghusl so that they don't harm the other believers in the masjid.
You have to make wudu afterwards, like to...
Now we're getting to that. There's two ways of performing ghusl. Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second. You're talking about how to make the ghusl, yeah?
Yeah, so just because, say for example, you wanted to pray, you need tahara. Like,
No, ghusl is enough. Ghusl is wudu and more.
even if you don't have any like janaba beforehand.
Not even if you don't have any janaba beforehand. But we shall get to the ways of performing it. Like it is, ghusl is more than, if you've got the intention of purifying yourself, as long as you've got the intention of purifying yourself for ibadah, then it's fine. طيب. So the Shaykh is now going to mention the way to do ghusl. And in summary, there are two ways of doing ghusl. In summary, there are two ways of doing ghusl. What is ghusl? Ghusl is that you put water in every part of your body. You make sure that all of your body is wet. That's what ghusl means. So there are two ways of performing it. There's a sunnah way and there's a way that is permissible. Like in both circumstances, you would be pure. The first is that you go to the bathroom, purify yourself, go to the bathroom, clean yourself, wash your hands. Wash your hands. So obviously, it's a sunnah in the beginning to wash your hands, make sure they're clean. And then you make your wudu as normal. You make wudu as normal. You do complete wudu. Once you do your complete wudu, then you go into the bathroom and you pour water over yourself, or you wet your roots, wet your hair 3 times, and then you pour water over your right hand side 3 times, and then your left hand side 3 times. Or your right hand side and then all over your body. So the first way is that you make wudu, the normal wudu that you would make, for salah, and then wash your whole body in the bathroom. Once you wash your whole body, then you come out. You're good to go. You've now performed your ghusl. That's the first way. Who's going to repeat that first way? The first method. You've kind of confused me in the end, but yeah. But no, you're right. Everything that you said, but you know, with the right hand in the end, you just pour water using whatever hand on your right hand side 3 times, and then you wet your whole body. Yeah? So that's the complete way. Then there's the second way of performing ghusl, which is what? You go into the bath straight away, and then you pour water all over yourself from head to toe. Lakin, once rinsing your mouth and your nose, making sure the water goes into your mouth and your nose, and you blow your nose out. So that's the second way. You wet your whole body, pour water. Now you can use a jug as water to pour yourself over, pour the water over you, or you can switch on the shower and go under the shower. Wet your whole body, but you make sure you wash your mouth. Make sure you rinse your mouth and you blow out your nose, the water that you've put in your nose. Is that understood?
For the first way, if you make wudu, how do you clean your body? Does that include your private parts?
Yeah, you clean your private parts. You clean your whole body. The first way, you clean your whole body. Both of them, you clean your whole body.
You make wudu first, then you clean your body, touching your private parts.
Yeah, you make wudu as normal, and then when you're washing, you clean your whole body anyway. And you can use shampoo, or you can use whatever you want.
You can still touch your private parts.
You can still touch your private parts, because we said that touching your private parts doesn't what? Nullify your wudu. It's sunnah to make wudu from touching your private parts. And it's more recommended if it's for sexual desire. But when you're having a bath, it's not for sexual desire.
You say the second method, that you can go into the bathroom straight and then put water all over your body. Would you need to make wudu before that as well?
No, you don't need to. So the first one is a sunnah, and the second part is But the second type is permissible. It's enough. It's like the bare minimum necessity. So when you come out, you don't need to make wudu. You just need to make sure you put water in your mouth and your nose though. Why? Because the mouth and the nose are from the body. They're from the face. So if you leave them out, then you've obviously left a part of your body with the water and not touching it. So you can rinse your mouth before or after. Before going into the shower, you can just using the small sink, clean your nose and your mouth. Or you can complete your wash, come out and pour water on yourself, on your nose, into your nose and your mouth. Or you could do it whilst you're in the shower. Is that understood? Your ears, you don't have to necessarily put your ears in your hands. You don't have to put your ears in your hands. Okay? If you do so, it's fine. Like, you don't have to. No, you don't have to clean yourself so much. You just make sure your body's clean. Yeah, like you. But you mean with clean yourself before wudu? You mean? Bathroom. You clean yourself. You make sure the water reaches your whole body. That's what ghusl is. Not necessarily that you wash your body with soap or whatever it may be. The water reaching your body cleans your body.
Can you come with the intention of making wudu as well whilst you're making the wash?
Yes, you have the intention. So when you have, if it's a Friday or if you can have the two intentions of ghusl of Friday and the ghusl of impurity. Have one intention, but with the intention that you're purifying yourself. So when you do that, you can go to the masjid and pray, or you can pray in your home. You don't need to make wudu after your ghusl. Because ghusl is wudu and more. How many limbs do you wash when you're making wudu? 4, right? Your face, your hands, and your feet, and you wipe over your head, right? 4. What about ghusl? The whole body, right? So ghusl is wudu and more. Fadal akhi. That's fine as well. That is fine as well. But that's similar to the second type that we mentioned, where you wash your body. So you've washed your body. But in any case, you need to have the intention. If you're cleaning yourself from sexual impurity, you need to have the intention though. Because it is a ibadah and every ibadah requires intention. If we carry on answering, we're not going to finish a lot. طيب. The next chapter, Babu Tayammum. Tayammum is the second type of tahara. The first type of tahara is with water. So when you're making wudu, it's with what? Water. And if you're making ghusl, it is with what? Water. Lakin, because our sharia is a complete and comprehensive sharia, there are situations where a person cannot find water. They may be in the middle of nowhere, the water might actually run out, and so on. So what does that require? They still need to do tayammum. So tayammum means using dust, sand, mud, that is obviously dry, and then using that to clean yourself. The Shaykh will mention how. The Shaykh is going to mention at the end how to perform tayammum. The Shaykh says, وَهَذَا النَّوْعُ الثَّانِي مِنَ الطَّهَارَةِ. That is the second type of purification. The first type of purification is what? With water. Purification with water. Purifying yourself with water. Whether it's ghusl, whether it's wudu. The second type is what? Tayammum. The second type of tayammum. And it's obviously using sand or mud or turab, dust or whatever it may be that you're using. The Shaykh says, وَهُوَ بَدَلٌ عَنِ الْمَاءِ. It is a badal from ma. Meaning it's a substitute. It takes the place of water. It takes the place of water. So everything that you would use for water, when you make wudu, everything that you're able to do with wudu, you now can do with tayammum. Why? Because it does the same thing. It does the same thing. For example, now, if I get Mustafa and I ask him to hold the microphone, and then Mustafa says, I'm tired, after an hour he says, I'm tired, and I say, okay, I'm going to get Yahya. Yahya stands in the place of Mustafa. what is he going to be doing? Exactly the same thing as Mustafa, right? Which is what? Holding the microphone. We're not going to ask him to put it on the floor or throw it somewhere. We're going to, because he's now replacing who? Mustafa. He replaces him and he does the same thing. That's the same for wudu. Wudu, tayammum replaces wudu. And when tayammum replaces wudu, it does everything that wudu does. For example, if you don't have water and you make tayammum, we'll talk about how to make tayammum. Like if you make tayammum using dust, sand, and so on, you can pray your 5 daily prayers. What else can you do? Whether it's sunnah or the wajib prayers. You can go into the masjid as normal. You can read the Quran as normal. You can do tawaf around the Kaaba as normal. You can do everything that you would have done with wudu. There's a masala that the scholars talk about. Is it a rafi' or is it mubih? You might want to write that down for anyone who wants to look into it more. Is it a mubih or is it a rafi'? So the scholars say, is it only something that allows you to do that specific ibadah? Or is it exactly the same and it lifts everything that the wudu would have done? For example, if I make wudu now and I pray Salatul Isha and then I want to pray a sunnah after it, do I need to make another wudu? No. So tayammum, if I make tayammum, I don't have water, I make tayammum and I pray Isha. If I want to make a few sunnahs after, pray a few sunnahs after, do I need to make another tayammum? No. What about if I want to read the Quran of Allah? No. Do I need to make another tayammum? What about tawaf? Do I need to make another tayammum? No. So therefore, it is a badal. Rafi' is a badal of, is a replacement of wudu. It does everything that wudu does. Is that understood? And the evidence obviously, فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا. And if you don't find water, then perform tayammum. The Shaykh says, so now he's going to go into when you can use tayammum. So put a title next to إِذَا تَعَذَّرَ, or when to use tayammum, or when you can use tayammum. Number 1, the Shaykh says إِذَا تَعَذَّرَ استعمال الماء لأعطاء الطهارة أو بعضها لعدمه أو طيب. إذا تعذر من استعمال الماء. If a person cannot use water or cannot wash the parts that they're meant to wash, لعدمه, because he doesn't have it. If you don't have water, that's the first reason for you, or that's the first thing that makes it permissible for you to make wudu, the lack of water. If you don't have water, that's a reason for you to perform wudu. So that's number 1. The Shaykh mentions, which is if you don't have wudu, then that is a reason for you to perform ghusl. It's a reason for you to perform tayammum. So for example, if the water runs out, or if there's a blockage on one of the sewers and there's no water in the running tap, then you can make tayammum. Because you don't have water. Also, if you've got water, but you've only got enough water for drinking. So you've got enough water, but you've got enough water only for drinking. What do? You do tayammum. Because now, this small amount of water that you have to drink is equivalent to you not having water. What about if you have a small amount of water that you can make wudu with? Maybe you can wash your face and your hands, that's it. And the rest, you can't. What do? Do you combine both? Do you make wudu with whatever water you have and then do tayammum? Or do you do tayammum straight away? Do tayammum? Do both. Why is that? Until the water runs out. But this water that you have, you can't do wudu with it. So it's equivalent to this water not existing in the first place. So as you said, you do tayammum. So if you've got water but it's only enough to drink or to cook with and that's it, then you cannot perform both. So you need to just perform tayammum. And that might be hard to understand because we don't live in, we live in the city, and a lot of the times we have water. Lakin, the only way that it can happen nowadays is if, for example, there's a blockage on one of the sewers and they come over and they block all of their sinks. So there's no water coming out where you don't have any water. So in that case, obviously, it's easy to imagine. طيب. The second reason the Shaykh says, أو خوف ضرر باستعماله, or if a person is scared to use the water due to an illness. So for example, if a person has been burnt, for example, if a person is burnt and many parts of the body parts that they would usually wash for wudu are burnt, then it's harm. If the water touches it, then it's going to harm it. So what do? They perform tayammum. What do? They perform tayammum. Or if they feel that it delays the recovery process, then in that case they make tayammum. Or if a person fears that if he uses this part of this water to make wudu, then they're not going to be left with anything to drink. طيب. So the Shaykh says فيقوم التراب مقام الماء بأن ينوي. Now he's going to talk about how to make tayammum. Firstly, he says أن ينوي رفع ما عليه من الأحداث. He has the intention to remove the impurities that he has. So any impurity that he has the intention to remove it. طيب. ثم يقول بسم الله, and then he says بسم الله. ثم يضرب التراب بيده أو بيده مرة واحدة. So he goes like that. So he says بسم الله, بسم الله. He hits the dust, the floor, and then the Shaykh says one time, then the Shaykh ويمسح أو يمسح بهما جميع وجهه. Then he washes he wipes his whole face. We said the face starts from the beginning of the hairline to the cheekbone, to the bottom of the cheekbone, and from one earlobe to the other. So he wipes that. وَجَمِيعَ كَفَّيْهِ, and both of his hands. And then he does that. So the first is that you have to make the intention, and then you say Bismillah, which is Sunnah. Then you hit both hands, and you wash your face. You wipe over your face, and then over your hands. If there is a lot of dust on your hands and that, you can blow it off, and then you put it over your face. And the evidence the Shaykh mentions is فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا, that if you don't find any water, then use tayammum. Use tayammum. طيب. What about if a person makes tayammum? So for example, they're at home and then Salatul Dhuhr comes in at 1 o'clock. Salatul Dhuhr comes in at 1 o'clock, and then obviously Asr comes in, whatever, 4 o'clock or whatever it may be. Like during the time of Dhuhr, there's no water. There's no water. They've put a notice on there saying your building will be without water for between 1 p.m. or between 12 p.m. and 6 p.m. So there's a notice there that says you won't have any water from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. And there is no water there. There is no water there in the tap when you open it. And you need to obviously pray Dhuhr, because 6 o'clock is not the time for Dhuhr. Then a person makes tayammum. You make tayammum. Once you make tayammum, all of a sudden at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, the water starts running. So you've made tayammum and you prayed Dhuhr at 1 o'clock. Are you with me here? You've done tayammum and you pray Dhuhr. Alhamdulillah, you've done your ibadah. Then at 3 o'clock or at 2:30, you hear the taps, they're running. Now you have water. What do? Do you repeat your salah that you prayed earlier on with tayammum? Or do you, now that you have water and it's still the time for salah, and technically you are with water now, you're not without water, do you repeat your salah and make tayammum with water? Who says you have to repeat your salah? Okay, why?
You had the tayammum is a substitute.
It's a substitute, it's a replacement. And now you have water. So you can't use the replacement when there's water. Jade, excellent. Anyone else? Who says you don't have to repeat your salah? Why don't you have to repeat your salah?
Because at that time it was accepted, so it was used as a weather. So for that reason, it's
How do you know it was accepted? Did the revelation come down and you say it was accepted?
not as in the salah was accepted, the tayammum can be used as a weather in that situation.
Say sound. No, you're right. Accepted is for example. Say sound. The salah was correct at the time. It was sound. As for accepted, Allahu A'lam. Yani, if Allah Jalla wa Ala accepted it from you. Okay? I get what you're saying. Your tayammum was sound and your salah was sound. It was correct. You did what was wajib on you at that time by making tayammum. Does everyone agree with the Shaykh? No. That's the correct opinion. You don't need to repeat your salah. Why? Because you've already made your salah. You've already prayed. You've already prayed. And you had a legitimate excuse for using the water, the tayammum.
Once the water has come, the next, you haven't broken your
That's a good question.
do you have to go to wudu with that water?
That's a good question. Let me ask you. If, for example, now I make tayammum at 2 o'clock and there is no water, then the time of Asr comes and I'm still on my tayammum. I haven't broken my wudu. I haven't broken my wudu. I've still got the tayammum that I made and I'm on wudu. And then during the time of Asr, I find water. During the time of Asr, I find water. Do I need to wash myself with water, make wudu, or am I on wudu? Can I carry on praying with the wudu that I already made the tayammum with? You have to. Who says you have to make wudu? Put your hands up. You have to make wudu. Who says you don't have to make wudu? في خلاف بين العلماء. There's خلاف between the scholars. طيب, who says why do you have to make wudu? Okay. Maybe there is Allahu Alam lakin. Okay, I get what you're saying. Now you have water, you're saying basically. Who says you don't have to? Why not? Why don't you have to repeat it? Oh, sorry, why don't you have to make wudu now? You've already made your wudu, you're good to go. You make wudu again. You make sure you make wudu again. Because now you have water. And the excuse for using tayammum is gone. The excuse for using tayammum is now gone.
You know, like the situation you mentioned, you make tayammum and it's dawn time, so you pray dawn, and then the water, and you make tayammum, and then the water comes back on while you're in salah. You have to leave the salah and make wudu.
Believe it or not, that's something that the scholars talk about. That's something that the scholars talk about. The best thing to do in that case would be to leave the salah, because there's doubt. You're going to have a doubt in your salah. Do I have to leave the salah? Do I not? You're always going to have the doubt. But if you stay in your salah, it wouldn't be far off, because you started your salah in the correct way. You started your salah in the correct way. There's khilaf. So it's something that the scholars talk about. طيب. So now the Shaykh is going to talk about a few issues, and we'll end up with this chapter for now, because we've got 2 lessons after, and hopefully we'll get past. The Shaykh is now going to talk about things that the person who is on minor impurity and major impurity cannot do. So if a person has hadath al-asghar, so he needs to hadath al-asghar, if he needs to perform wudu, لم يحل له يصلي. It's not permissible for you to pray. ولا أن يطوف بالبيت, and it's not permissible for you to do tawaf around the Kaaba if you don't have wudu. ولا أن يمس المصحف, and it's not permissible that you touch the mushaf with your bare hands. The Shaykh says, if you're making wudu, if you're on minor impurity, like what you should do is go make wudu and then touch the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ويزيد من عليه حدث أكبر. Like if you require if you require a ghusl, لا يقرأ شيئا من القرآن. The Shaykh says he doesn't read anything from the Quran. He doesn't read anything from the Quran. Like, he should go back and make wudu immediately, make ghusl. He should go back and make ghusl. So that's from the opinions of the scholars. Some other scholars say that it's permissible for you to read the Quran because you're reading the Quran as Quran, or because it's there's no evidence, clear-cut evidence preventing you from doing so. Like, if a person is on janaba, the best thing they could do is read. The best thing they could do is make ghusl. If they're in sexual impurity or they need ghusl, they should make ghusl as soon as possible and then start to read the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Last issue. وَلَا يَلْبَثُ فِي الْمَسْجِدِ بِلَا وُضُوءٍ. And also, if a person requires a ghusl, they shouldn't stay in the masjid without making wudu. So if you come to the masjid and you require a ghusl due to sexual impurity or the ending of menses or the end of postnatal bleeding, and you need to make ghusl, and you can't do it at that particular time, go and make wudu. Once you make wudu, then you can sit in the masjid. Once you make wudu, then you can sit in the masjid. Like, if you're on major impurity and you need to make ghusl, like you're not able to, there's no showers in the masjid, for example, make wudu and then you can stay in the masjid. And that's been affirmed narrated from some of the companions of Allah Ta'ala alayhim. The Shaykh says, تزيد الحائض والنفساء أنها لا تصوم ولا يحل وطئها ولا طلاقها. As for the woman that is on her menses or postnatal bleeding, it's not permissible for her to pray, and it's not permissible for her to fast, and it's not permissible for her to have intercourse, and it's not permissible to give her talaq. It is not permissible to divorce her. You need to wait until her haid ends. Wallahu a'lam. We'll finish there, inshallah. Next, we'll start from the chapter of menses. We've got 2 classes after. Hopefully, we shall cut a fair amount. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam wa ahkamu billahi tawfiq. Barakallahu fiik, Shaykh.